All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining us again today. My name is Christopher Jammer. I am one of the account managers for Airrosti Rehab Centers here in our Austin region. And today we have with us Dr. Kevin Herman and his recovery specialist, Reese, who you will see a little bit later, or you'll see now. And we're going to talk to you guys specifically about health at your desk. So just to go over some housekeeping things before we move into the content. As you guys saw, all of your microphones were muted. That's to make sure that Dr. Herman, myself, and Reese can get you the information as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and to cut down on some background noise. But if you guys have any questions and you are joining us via a computer, you can definitely send those over to us in the chat function on Zoom. Also, if you have some really specific questions that you would like to ask us, in the top right-hand corner of the slide presentation, you'll see a QR code where you can scan that and take advantage of one of our complimentary virtual injury and pain chats. So if you would like to talk directly with one of our providers one-on-one outside of the group setting, you can definitely scan that code and schedule yourself a time to do that. But as I said before, if you would like to just ask a general question for the group, you can send those over in the chat and we will get that answer for you in real time. So to talk specifically about what we're going to discuss today, Dr. Herman will talk specifically about some effects of prolonged sitting on our bodies. He'll go over some conditions and pains that occur with those particular conditions and talk a little bit about some tools for prevention. And then at the end, we'll go a little bit more into Airrosti, what we do specifically for these conditions. And then at the end, we'll leave some time for the Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Herman to take us through.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you guys all had a fantastic day. We're just wrapping up here in clinic. Can't wait to get started with this presentation for you. So as Chris was saying, we were talking about symptoms and issues that occur while we're sitting at our desk or just sitting in general. As you can see here in this slide, we have a little bit more stats about, back pain and sitting and why we should care about everything that we're talking about today. So 80% of all Americans report having prolonged sitting as their main activity throughout the day, with very little exercising outside of it or even taking breaks throughout the day. So we see a lot of our patients coming in here because they've had this prolonged sitting. 7.7 hours per day is the average in which someone sits, and that's not just at work, right? At work, that's driving to work if we're going into the office. That is sitting on the couch, that's having meals. So a lot of things contribute to work or to sitting. That is not just the work part of it. We've found that, research has found that sitting increases your risk for chronic diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes, kidney disease, and colorectal cancer. And it increases imbalances in our body. So we start getting pain in our back or our necks, start getting tension headaches. So prolonged sitting or prolonged anything in any matter is going to create some sort of response that triggers some dysfunction in our body. So why does this all occur? So we're going to talk here a little bit more about what the sitting aspect is, how sitting for a long period of time affects our body. When we're sitting, we're starting usually nowadays are all over computers, right? So computers, laptops, just desktops, we all have these screens right in front of us. Some are low, some are high. So it changes how we position our neck. It changes how we position our spine. So while we're sitting at the desk, how many of us are like leaning into the computer to see closer to what we're doing? I mean, that's me like all the time. Like, what is that word? I don't know. Let me look closer. All right. We start rounding our shoulders as we are in this typing position. So we're like this, right? So round, 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 round. The more we round, the more dysfunction we're going to create for our body. As our shoulders round forward, you're going to start to pinch, right? So the muscles that attach to the front of the shoulders are going to start to shorten. And the muscles in the back of the shoulder are going to start to lengthen or stretch out. And now we're getting this imbalance of muscles that are too tight and muscles that are too weak to start affecting that control. That flexion creates that kyphosis, that rounding of the spine. None of us want that hunchback. So we're all trying to stand up straight and be present with all this. And of course, the hip flexor, one of the biggest things that we see when it comes to our sitters is that those hip flexors start to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And that's when we start seeing things like back pain really start to become a problem. So now we're going to talk into conditions that are associated with sitting or prolonged position holding, not just back pain, but we're talking about a whole bunch of stuff. So here we're talking about upper cross. The upper cross syndrome is essentially a postural syndrome. It's talking about because we are in this rounded position, Our shoulders are going to get tight. So right here we see the tight pectorals. The upper traps and levator, muscles that shrug up the shoulders or bring it forward, they are always in an on position, so they never get the rest. So we get tighter and tighter, and then we start putting our hand behind us like, why is this not going away? It's because these muscles are too tight. And then we have the opposite side of the upper cross or of the cross, which is weak, deep neck flexor. So as we start putting our chin closer and closer to the screen, we're going into more of an extended position. So the flexors sort of get stretched out. And when a muscle gets overly stretched, it starts to weaken. It's unfortunate. And then weakness in the back. So again, as that shoulder rounds forward, the muscles attached to the shoulder blade, to the spine, are again getting overstretched. So now they are now weakening as well. Here we have the lower cross. So on the opposite side, so the upper cross is for the neck, lower cross is for the low back. In the same kind of positioning, we're going to see tight erector spinae. Now these erector spinae are the muscles along our spine in our low back. I'm sure we've all felt those tight tissues as we're bending over, flexing because of how long we've been sitting. Tight hip flexion. We just talked about that chronic shortening of that hip flexion, that iliopsoas component. Weak core, weak glutes. This term gluteal amnesia has gone around through the rehab world in the sense that because we sit for so long, our glutes start to not work the way they're supposed to. And then when we stand up, instead of using our glutes to generate that propulsion forward, we start using our legs to get up and then our back to pull us straight. So that gluteal amnesia becomes a really big issue when we're having weak glutes. And that means the tight hip flexors are fighting a weak glute max. So now they're going to get tighter and tighter and tighter because the glute just can't resist. Tension headaches, my favorite, right? So these are the headaches that start kind of in our neck and kind of wrap around our ears, going over towards our, we feel pressure behind our eyes. A lot of this is due because of the upper traps and the suboccipital muscles, which are the small muscles. They're about this big, just like an inch or so big. They sort of get tighter and tighter because we're holding that extended position. And so as they start to get tight, they create all this pressure. And in our body, we have very little space. So everything is stacked on top of itself. The only air we have in our body is in our lungs and in our guts. A lot of things are stacked on top of each other. And when that pressure starts to compress on arteries, then we start getting that throbbing sensation that goes through our head. We start getting those feelings behind the eyes or that pressure in our skull. So the tension is really just kind of that compression of the tissue around our head due to how tight these muscles start to get. As the name implies, it is the tension of the muscles that generate this, but it can also be affected by diet, your fitness, hormones, and stress. All these players play a role in how a tension headache is developing, and so not every tension headache is the same. Mid-back pain. So here we see a lot of people having these knots in their back that feel really good when they're massaged, but that massage relief only lasts maybe an hour, maybe a day, and then boom, it comes right back, right? We've all had that. Essentially what we're seeing is a lot of weakening in those mid-back muscles. So that rhomboid, that mid-trap, that low trap, because they're being overstretched by that slouch position, they don't get the attention they need. And when muscles don't get attention, they start to hurt because they're like, pay attention to me. Muscles can do one thing and one thing only, and that is turn on. That's it. They can only pull, all right? We don't have any pusher muscles. We have just muscles that flex, that create that pushing mechanism. So all muscles are pulling and pulling and pulling. So mid-back symptom pain, pain between the shoulder blade and the spine. Sometimes it radiates upwards, sometimes it radiates downwards, but usually it's caused because of a muscle imbalance. Tight muscles pulling one way, weak muscles not being able to help. So when those tight pectoral muscles that we talked about earlier start to get really tight, those tight traps, levator round that forward, we're getting overstretching of those rhomboids, and that's where it gets a lot of this pain coming. On rare cases, we do have disc issues that create mid-back pain, but that's very mild and very rare. All right, so thoracic outlet syndrome. This is an interesting one, all right? This is the one I have a lot of conversation with my patients about, especially if they've been told like, hey, I have carpal tunnel, I have cubital tunnel. Thoracic outlet syndrome is a global term for a combination of effects, right? So we're getting pain that may be in the neck or shoulder. We're getting numbness and tingling. That's the big one for thoracic outlet syndrome. We get numbness, tingling, maybe some weak strength in our hands when we're holding pencils, opening doors, things like that. Essentially, we have a few players in our neck, in our shoulder, that can create compression to tissues like nerves, like blood vessels. And when those things are obstructed, we start to get this sensory feeling downstream, okay? The numbness and tingling of the hands can come from carpal tunnel. They could also come from the elbow, cubital tunnel, or from the pec, because this pec minor is so tight from rounding that we're getting compression. Or we have a cervical rib putting pressure, or the scalene from the neck putting too much pressure on these arteries. So all things that can contribute to a thoracic outlet syndrome, but the main player is that numbness tingling going down the hands. Carpal tunnel. So we just talked about that numbness and tingling for the thoracic outlet syndrome. Very common for carpal tunnel to be confused with thoracic outlet or cubital tunnel. But essentially what we're getting in the palm, we're getting this numb tingling sensation where it feels like we constantly have to slap our hands to wake it up. We're having trouble typing, we're having trouble holding things. And what ends up happening is carpal is a reference to the bones in our wrist called the carpal bones. And in that wrist, there's a tunnel. And that tunnel is where the median nerve comes through to let talk to that palmar aspect of our hand. And so when we get too much stress put on that hand, so let's think about like if we're typing and our wrist is too extended like this, all this stress on this side of the bone or this side of the hand where that nerve comes through, it's getting a lot of tension put onto it. And if we do that enough times, as you're seeing here, force times repetition, that is the biggest cause of stress on this area. So it's really important to put a little bit more flexion in our wrists when we are typing than this extended position to help mitigate any kind of situation where carpal tunnel might develop. All right, low back pain. Of course, sitting for long periods of time, we're gonna get low back pain. As we talked about earlier slides, a big component of that is going to be the shortening of those hip flexors. And Reese, my partner here, he's going to be going through a hip flexor stretch. It's going to be, I think, probably the most important slide in our talk, just because so many people deal with low back pain that in the CS. All right, but back pain can vary. It can be sharp, it can be achy, it can be dull, it can be very localized, it can be very diffuse. So it can be going all over the place. It might radiate and shoot and travel to certain places. Depending on how that pain is traveling or where it's coming from, we can start to see different types of injuries being present. So disc herniations, SI joint sprains, radiculopathies from the lumbar spine, spasms and strains of those muscles in our low back. So a lot of it's going to be developed because of a muscle imbalance. Our body just doesn't have things happen to it. Or for those lucky of us, don't have it. Some people are born with some congenital issues, and that's just not fair, honestly. But with what we're doing here, we're going to deal with an imbalance. Something's too tight, something's too weak, and our body's just trying to find a way to balance it, and that's where pain comes through. All right, so in these preventative strategies, I'm going to hand it off to my partner, Reese. The way Airrosti set up is that we have a 30-30 model, so half hour for the soft tissue component, half hour of the rehab. At my clinic, Reese is in charge of our rehab department here. So I'm going to have him walk us through some of the stretches that I think are going to be important for you guys to take home or use at home while you're working or sitting at your desk. So Reese.
Hey everybody, I hope you're all doing well. Just going to go ahead and start off with the seated neck stretch here. So I'm going to point this down or just move the test down either or works for me. So a lot of the stuff we're going to be showing y'all today is stuff that you can do very easily at your desk or at work in some way. So we are going to start with the seated neck stretch. So to do this one, we are going to just sit up in a nice upright posture, hands on the bottom of the chair, and we're just going to pick one side at a time. Just try to place that ear onto the shoulder. Y'all are more than welcome to do this with me as we go along if y'all want, or you can just watch for now. That's perfectly fine as well. So when we lean to that side, we're going to be stretching the opposing side of the neck. And then obviously you want to do this both ways. All right. Super simple stretch to do. Something we can knock out any time of the day, seated, standing, at the grocery store, anytime. All right. Usually do this one about 30 seconds at a time, 30 to 45 if you can manage that. I know sometimes time is limited, so 30 seconds is the goal, all right? Move on to the next one here. All right, the executive stretch. So this is a great stretch for the glutes. So for this one, we are going to put the camera down just a tad bit more. So for this one, we are going to place, one leg on top of the other in a figure 4 position. So I want the hand on the knee and the hand on the foot. I don't want you pushing down on either super hard or anything like that. Just want the hands placed here. Nice upright posture. So we might already feel a little bit of a stretch in this right glute, the leg that's over the other. And if this is as far as we can go, that's a-okay. But if we can go a little bit further than this, that's awesome. So we're going to keep that nice posture and just slowly lean forward until we get further and further into the stretch as far as we can go comfortably, all right? Hang out here 30 seconds as well. So this is one of those great stretches that you can do anytime. It's not going to stop you from working. It's not going to stop you from doing anything. Just a great one to do at the desk, all right, y'all? All right, hip flexor stretch. So as Dr. Herman was talking about earlier, this is one of the most important things that we are going to talk about today. When we are in the seated position all the time, our hips are always flexed. So these hip flexors are getting super tight right now. So I'm going to show you guys some ways to kind of loosen that one up. I'm actually going to move over to my mat here. So for this one, you show this to me pretty well from here. So for this one, we're going to get into a lunge position. I'll show you from this side, and I'll turn around and show you from the other side as well. So we're going to get into a lunge position. I want your torso to stay nice and upright the entire time, all right? So this front leg, I'm going to drive that over the knee and keep my torso nice and upright exactly where I had it at the start. So in this stretch, turn around so I can see the other side as well. So nice upright torso, knee over the toe. In this stretch, we are going to feel, we might feel a little bit of stretch to the quad, that's okay. But we should feel that stretch come up into that hip pocket area as well. This is one of those stretches we want to hold 30 to 45 seconds as well. As I said before, that's going to be the most important stretch we talk about today. Cannot stress that one enough. All right, chin tucks. Great one, simple one to do anywhere, anytime, especially when we're wearing a mask, it'll be even easier. So one thing I like to think of when I'm doing this one is, one cue I like to think of is pretend like you just saw something gross and I just pull my head back. So it's just kind of like this. So super simple. The goal here is basically give yourself a double chin. So we're pulling back, working those deep neck flexors that we were talking about before. Those muscles that get too extended when we're sitting down in that hunch position too long. So with this one, we want to make sure that we're not looking up. We want to make sure that we're not pulling our head down like that. We just want to go straight back. And this is a great one to do at the desk. You can do this while you're driving, pushing your head against your headrest, laying down, you can push your head into the pillow. This is something you can do anywhere, anytime. If you're at the grocery store and you are embarrassed by giving yourself a double chin, if you're wearing that mask, they won't even see it coming, all right? And for that one, we can knock that out any time of the day. Try to knock out like 10 at a time if we can do that. But you can never do too many of these. All right, now we can go into the next one now. All right, there we go. All right, so this next exercise, we are going to strengthen those postural muscles a little bit. I'm going to move this camera down a little bit. All right. So as you can see, he has a band. I'm going to demonstrate this one without the band because I assume most of y'all do not have that specific band with you. So we are going to place our hands out like we are holding a tray. And what I like to think about is trying to press my elbows towards the ground. So when I press my elbows down towards the ground, my shoulders naturally fall down as well with it. Towards this motion right here. So my shoulders stay depressed the entire time, all right? So shoulders are staying depressed. Now I'm going to keep those shoulders down and pinch those shoulder blades together. So that's how I'm setting it up. So elbows down towards the floor, pinching those shoulder blades together in the back. And then from here, we are just going to separate our arms, pull those apart, and we should feel those muscles in the mid-back really start to contract. So these are going to be our postural muscles that are helping to keep our shoulders back and down. So it's going to help us here. So for this one, recommend around 1 to 2 sets of 10, 2 to 3 times a day if we can manage that. That's the goal. Seated press-ups. So this is going to be an interesting one to demonstrate over the laptop. So this is a very simple exercise. As we were talking about earlier, the gluteal amnesia. So people forget to use their glutes. So we are going to focus on firing those guys, getting them working. So to do that, I am going to show you how my level will change here. So I'm going to squeeze my glutes as hard as I can and try to push myself up. So if anything, while you're sitting down, you'll get an inch or two taller. Squeezing the glutes, trying to push yourself up. So on the chair, we are just going to squeeze and try to push ourselves upward. But this one, it's another one of those ones, just like the chin tucks, there's never too many times to do it. I like to recommend doing 10 at a time if we can manage that. Obviously, an easy one to do anytime of the day, whenever we're sitting down, when you're working at the desk, when you're driving, anytime where you're not too busy, to just squeeze and try to push those guys up, getting them firing. Anything else on here? All right, you want to take it away, Dr. Herman?
That's me, Chris.
Okay, Chris.
All right, Dr. Herman and Reese, thank you guys both for going over the conditions, and also Reese for going over the different exercises that you guys can do while you're at your desk to alleviate some of these issues. So also, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the presentation, for all of you who are joining us on the computer, just to make sure that you get your wellness credit for viewing the live session, if you can, in the chat, send me your first name, last name, and your employee ID number so we can get those taken down for you. And I'll get those recorded as I go through the rest of the presentation. We go through the Q&A. So just to talk a little bit more about Airrosti, for those of you who are unfamiliar, if you are familiar, this is going to sound like a broken record, but generally, just like Dr. Herman said before, we have the 30-30 model, where the first half of anytime you come to a visit with Airrosti, you're going to be with one of our doctors going through some range of motion tests and also the hands-on manual therapy. And then the second half is going to be coupled with the active rehab, which Reese shows you some of the general exercises we show in clinic. So because of that treatment model, we only have to see our patients about 3 to 4 visits to get you to total pain resolution. And as you can see from the numbers on there, 9 out of 10 people who come to Airrosti for any of the different conditions that they have going on will report a full recovery, and also 99.6% of our patients will recommend us to our family and friends. So we understand that there's a small percentage of about 10% of patients that we necessarily can't help or can't fix because of a specific condition that they have come in. But we always like to get you to the right place. So we say that we want to quarterback your case, and regardless of if it's something that we can necessarily take care of in clinic, or if we have to get you to someone who can take care of that, we always want to make sure that our patients are well taken care of. So, and today specifically, Dr. Herman talked about some conditions that are associated with prolonged sitting or even prolonged standing, like lower back pain, some neck pain, tension headaches, and things like that. But we see a wide variety of different conditions coming to our office. It could be something acute, like an ankle sprain, or maybe some knee pain, or maybe some plantar fasciitis, or it could be something chronic in nature, which could be something like a tension headache, or it could be some carpal tunnel, or maybe some sciatic-like pain that you might be dealing with. And lastly, as always, Airrosti is an in-network benefit for all of Austin ISD's Aetna Health Plan members and their dependents. You don't need a referral to go see any of our providers, and Dr. Herman's location is right off of 35 in Riverside going south on the access road. Of course, as you can see, our clinics are still open, and we're making sure that we're adhering to all the recommendations of our clinical development team and the CDC. As you guys saw, Reese and Dr. Herman both had their mask on when the other was talking. But if you have any specific questions or would like to learn more about Airrosti, you could visit our website at airrosti.com or call the 1-800 number below. So, and lastly, we'd like to thank you all for joining us again today. Again, if you have any questions that you would like for us to answer, send those over in the chat. But if not, you are more than welcome to get some of your time back, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.